Mind Over Matter, the show where deep connections meet bold truths. Tonight, we welcome Dr. Diane Mueller, a board certified sexologist, dual doctorate naturopath, and acupuncturist, and the dynamic force behind mylibido.doc.com and the Libido Lounge Podcast. Dr. Diane is here to flip the script on long term relationships because what if passion doesn't have to fade with time? What if it could grow? Welcome to the show, Dr. Diane. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you, Heather. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Mhm. So, let's kick off with the big one. Why does passion decrease for so many couples over time?
It's such an important question and I think it's just pivotal, right? Because we're not taught stuff like this in school, we're not taught stuff like this in culture and society and we're thrown into relationships and we wind up like having all of the hopes and all of the dreams for them that they're going to be fulfilling and they're going to have passion and they're going to have stability and they're going to help with us building our lives and our families if that's the way we choose to go. And we're not really told about the science of the mind behind all of this. So, our minds really are set up on survival, right? From the true fundamental standpoint of the mind. And so, what winds up happening when it comes to the idea of passion? Passion, in part, in a huge part, is driven by the brain hormone, the neurotransmitter dopamine. And so, dopamine, how dopamine works is like dopamine works through not only reward, a lot of people know it as like a reward molecule, but it's also motivation. So, let's go back to the early stage when people are dating. So, when we're dating, when we just meet some new hot person and we're super excited about them, we begin to think about them. And there is this anticipation and are they going to call or when we're going to see each other and what should I wear and where we're going to go and how's our first kiss going to be on and on and on and on. In the beginning, every single thing that's happening is new. And so every single thing that is happening when we're thinking about it and where there's that anticipatory feeling, our body is sending surges of dopamine that is driving the motivation to seek them out, to see them again. And then we see them, and maybe we have our first kiss, or maybe we make love for the first time. And every time we do that, we get this reward, this chemical cocktail reward. So, this is what we call in the sex world the new relationship energy. So people are familiar with like, oh, that kind of fades over time. I don't think that's new information for anybody. Everybody can recognize that. But what we're not really taught is why. So one of the reasons why things fade over time as far as that new relationship energy is we start losing that dopamine component of things. So for example, when we move in with somebody, when we start seeing them every day, when we get married, when we have children, when we combine our lives in whatever way that looks for any couple, there's less space to create that dopamine desire. And furthermore, the body, like we are for survival, we are creatures of habit. So like down to like anybody that takes a morning walk that's listening probably takes a very similar route on their morning walk every day, right? So that happens, right? When we start getting into these habits so that we don't have to make so many decisions. And as we get into these habits, we become on autopilot with our walks, with our relationships, with all these things we do. Well, the more we become on autopilot with those things, the less we are actually creating that dopamine, that desire, that motivation towards something new, that anticipatory thing of I don't know what's going to happen, and the less dopamine we have, the less novelty we have, and the less passion we have. Now, this doesn't have to be like say a sentence, right? We just have to understand that dopamine is happening as part of that motivation. So then we can take a step back and say, okay, How do I begin to create more dopamine so that I can create more novelty, so that I can create more passion? And we can learn the steps to how to create more dopamine to start moving us into that more passionate relationship. Do you want me to continue on the steps, or did you
Mhm.
just want to pause in case you wanted me to go a different direction?
No, that works. And
Okay.
is it
Mhm.
biological inevitability or more about how we are showing up emotionally and rationally?
So what do you mean emotionally and so I'm not understanding your question here. What's the question?
Um, I was just asking, is it a biological inevitability or it's more about how we are showing up emotionally and relationshiply?
Well, I think there's I would say there is a inevitability to it if we're not taught another way. Right? So if left to our own devices, what tends to happen is we tend as humans naturally find shortcuts and ways of saying, wow, that's one less decision I have to make. That's one less thing I have to put effort into. So I'm going to make this as easy as possible because I have the kids, the job, the health, the house, the bazillion other things that any human has to manage. And so what we tend to do, I think from an inevitable standpoint, it's almost like inertia where it's like, okay, it just kind of stays in motion unless something else happens is we tend to form these habits, and the habits form like around like, okay, 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, whatever time your alarm goes off, you get up, you have like the same basic process of getting ready for the day. You go through the day, you have the same basic process throughout the night. Like that is what I think inevitably happens. It's inertia unless we are stepping in and saying, "Hey, I want to drive this train differently." So that's why I do the work that I do. That's why I run my Hot and Modern Monogamy Club is really helping teach people how to shift out of that inertia, right? Because I think most of the time, for most couples, due to habits, due to changes of dopamine, if left to their own devices, for most people, this is the direction that it goes. So, one of the things that can really help here, and a lot of people still are very good about scheduling date nights, right? So, date nights, I'm not the first person to say that. I will not be the last, as that's very basic 101. But here's where date nights oftentimes go wrong, where it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do for date night? Oh, we're going to go to one of our same five top restaurants. We're going to go to that thing. We're going to maybe come home, maybe try to make love and wrap up date night. So that's definitely better than nothing, right? Because there's still effort that is being put into the relationship, and that's still more than some couples are doing. But one of the biggest things to raise that dopamine is creating that novelty, and creating that novelty not just from a standpoint of intellectually and mentally, but also sexually and physically. So beginning to bring that dopamine back in, one of the best ways to bring dopamine back in is to create novelty in the relationship. And so date night then might be something like, okay, well, how can we actually have our physical intimacy in maybe a different time of the date? So many times people wait till the end of their date to get physically intimate, and then maybe there's been some wine, there's been some food, and now people are full and bloated and tired and not really in the mood. So, really beginning to strategize to say, okay, well, if we're going to be physically intimate, maybe the babysitter is going to come over at 5 o'clock, is going to take the kids to the park for an hour to an hour and a half. That's going to be our time before we get ready for dinner, right? Before we do all that. And then to make it more novel, then one of the things that we begin to do is we actually start to bring some flirt back into our relationship. So we start to say, what are we going to do on at our sexy time that's different? Are we going to try a different position? Are we going to do some tantra and some breath work? Are we going to bring maybe some sort of sex toy into it? Are we going to maybe blindfold each other? Just thinking about all these different ways. And I do walk people through in my work, like how to bring novelty back in, but just to give you like some ideas. And so the other thing that does for us is that allows us the entire week before we get to our sexy date night It gives us information to flirt about. It gives us information to tease about around like, oh, I'm so excited about that thing that we're going to try. And so what you're doing with that, like, yes, it's flirting, but what it's actually doing is it's changing the chemicals in the brain. Because the moment we start flirting and teasing about those things, now we're creating anticipation. Now we're creating novelty into the unknown. Now we are building dopamine. And when we build dopamine, we begin to build desire back in. And that novelty and the newness and the curiosity to try something new is one of the fundamental ways that we begin to do that and bring our passion back together.
Mm-hmm. That shift from spark to stagnant is so common. But as you're saying, it's not unavoidable.
Correct, correct. Like the way I say it is like, okay, everybody, like the dishes are always going to be there, right? The dishes never go away. Like you're going to have dishes tomorrow and the day after and the day after. And, that's probably predictable. But if you don't spend time putting energy into your sexual spark, your relationship spark, it will go away. And, sometimes I find too that one of the things that can help couples when it's like people are so busy is to really understand like the science behind this, because I feel like when we understand the why, then it can help with the motivation to put time into this. Because let's face it, everybody is so busy between taking care of their body, taking care of their house, taking care of their families, taking care of their relationships, their friendships, on and on and on. So, how do we motivate ourselves to prioritize this when we already have a bazillion other priorities, right? That's, one of the $1 million questions. So, I like people to understand some things we see in research, such as the fact that we see that studies have shown that on studies on marital support have shown that when couples have strong marriages, there is a direct relationship to better cardiovascular health, which is really important since cardiovascular disease is the number one killer worldwide, right? So we see that o oxytocin, which some people know as, like, the cuddle hormone or the hug hormone or the love hormone, it is one of the best ways for balancing dopamine, for improving, happiness. It helps couples actually communicate better. It helps build bones for people that are in osteoporosis. It helps lower cortisol for people that are worried about cortisol and stress and belly fat and all those things. It helps with sleep. So it's one of the most amazing things. And while hugging increases oxytocin, a hug may only increase oxytocin 20, 30, 40%, which is still good. But with orgasm and with actually learning how to have better orgasms, we see that the oxytocin in our brain isn't just like increased by 20%. It oftentimes will increase by five-fold. So it multiplies itself five-fold over in the blood. So when we see stuff like that and we see like, wow, oxytocin is one of the most like healing things. Like right now, it's been even studied. There's like studies going on for researching for helping it with for using oxytocin to help with things like drug withdrawal, alcohol withdrawal, because of how balancing it is to the nervous system. So when I see this, it's like we have this perfect way of balancing our stress, of creating more happiness, of creating better relationships, of improving cardiovascular health, of improving bones, and of really, in many ways, I think sex is like such a beautiful expression of connecting to spirit, to God, to whatever word anybody uses there. And so there's just like this incredible way of being balanced in the body. But if we just kind of go through the motions and don't prioritize it, it's not going to do any of that. So when we think about all the things that it does, that's one of the most key reasons to start prioritizing, making this a important part of your life again.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, then how do couples keep passion alive in the long run? What's the secret sauce?
Yeah, there's a few different things. So, one, I'm going to direct all listeners to my quiz, libidoquiz.com. So, this is really important because one of the number one things, there's three different categories of keeping passion alive. One is physical. So, like, is there something going on physically in your body, an imbalance that is leading to low desire, right? And many of these imbalances are not being looked at and talked about in, from a standpoint of your doctor. So if you go to libidoquiz.com, it's a free quiz. And when you take the quiz, it's going to spit out information for you of like, hey, here's some of the reasons from a physical standpoint why, for the uniqueness of your quiz answers, why you might not have as much passion or desire in your own self. And here are some tests and some things to talk to your doctor about. So that's libidoquiz.com, actually looking and saying, okay, what are the fundamental physical root causes that are leading to the low desire? Now, the second category of things that really leads to that low desire and passion is not knowing one's own body. And this is where, sometimes it's like a lot of people do not understand, and I show people in my work anatomically exactly where, like, the clitoris is, for example. Well, most people, like, even in school, I did not learn how big the clitoris is. It's not just this little nub that we see. It extends far deep into our pelvis. And what we see for women is that some parts of the female anatomy are more sensitive than others. And so many times people, and I see this like very frequently in particular with women, that they're not feeling motivated to have sex. They're not feeling motivated to feel, passion and all that, because their anatomy and the parts of their anatomy that are sensitive, that feel stimulation, that maybe are less sensitive, are very unique from another female's. And so when people don't know their own body, their own turn-ons, their own turn-offs, one of the things that happens is it's very common to engage intimately and be like, well, that really didn't wasn't that great, because we don't know how to instruct our partner. And so the first thing is really understanding, like, oh, is it like, the left part of my vulva or the right part of my vulva? Or is it like deeper in my pelvis? Or is it more internally in the vagina? Or is it all the way to the cervix or the right wall, the left wall, the anterior wall, etc.? What parts are most stimulating to you and what parts are actually not that stimulating? Maybe there's some numbness, maybe there's some scar tissue, maybe there's some pain, which can all be healed. And that's like a whole nother topic. But so that's kind of the second thing for desire, is really understanding your own body, because we can't begin to support our partner with learning our body if we don't even know what to tell them. So, in learning that, the other thing is learning your unique turn-ons and turn-offs. So another thing that I see happen so commonly in relationship is because it's like we all have our own like libido languages, kind of like the love languages. So I call them the libido code. So you can find these in a free quiz at libidocode.com. And so when you go to libidocode.com, what you'll find, and you take this test there, is that you'll find that there's 5 different major ways that we have turn-ons. And so, for example, one particular way is called the sensate. And so the sensate, for example, this person is so turned on by anything of the 5 senses. So the right lights, the right music, the right, outfit that has the right, tactile sensation on it, etc. And so what we can see is like if we have one person in a partnership that is a sensate and we have another person that is not a sensate, then the they might start like kissing and just, beginning their fondling and foreplay. And a sensate will be like, all of a sudden they might jump up and be like, oh, we have to put this song on. Right. And so if the other person's not a sensate, that can feel really disruptive. And it can be like, wow, I was just like passionately kissing my partner and they just got up because the song wasn't right. Like that feels jarring. But if we begin to understand each other's turn-ons and turn-offs, then one of the things we can like understand is like, oh, it's not that that person was trying to be jarring. That person is actually trying to go deeper with me, and music and song is one of the things that will help them to do so. So that's really helpful. So we can learn our own turn-ons, our own turn-offs, and work with our partner on theirs. And that helps couples to get like more on the same page with their foreplay needs, more on the same page with their communication. So again, that is found at libidocode.com. So we have libidoquiz.com, libidocode.com. And then the third category of area where people, really need the support from a desire standpoint is the interpersonal, part. And the interpersonal part is how we are relating together. Are we able to talk about sex? Like that's another thing we see in surveys is that people that report having the best sex lives and they're the most sexually satisfied, the great majority of them, up to 91%, talk about sex. And so one of the biggest things is like we're not, sex is just kind of this like taboo topic, right? We're not taught um how to be comfortable talking about it and how to talk communicate in a way to not threaten our partner and hurt their ego and hurt their pride and all these things. But then the problem with not talking about it is so many couples are having what I call the wrong kind of sex, which just means the type of sex that does not work for their uniqueness of their pleasure bodies because they're not talking about it. So it's super important that we're talking about our fantasies, that we're talking about what works, what doesn't work. And we're beginning to have these kind of conversations and we're becoming curious about each other's, desires about all of these different things because that's essential. Otherwise, we can spend our whole life thinking that maybe its orgasms are difficult and we can't achieve them, or they're not that great, or it's not that interesting, or maybe something, it's so easy to think that we're broken when all it means is that we are not having the right kind of sex for our, unique pleasure body. So those are the three main categories that I find when it comes to desire that are super important to address.
Mm-hmm, definitely. So, are there small daily habits that build erotic tension even outside the bedroom?
100%. So, one of the things that I like to say is that the capacity to experience pleasure is directly related to the capacity to experience presence. So, nobody can have an orgasm that I've ever met when their mind is thinking about things like the to do list, right? Nobody can deeply enjoy an amazing cup of tea or a perfectly done meal that is just savors in the mouth when we're eating so fast and we're just hurried on to the next thing and we're not even chewing our food. Right. So the ability to experience pleasure in and outside the bedroom is directly connected to our ability for presence. In fact, in all the conversations we have around meditation and mindfulness and all of these great things, I think pleasure in my experience, pleasure is one of the best mindfulness based activities because you really have to be focused on the present moment to experience pleasure. So that means we get to practice that all throughout the day. So anything that is allowing us to practice being present and experiencing the pleasure of presence is going to help us in our intimate relationship. So that can be as simple as okay, if you're getting up and you're making tea or coffee in the morning, just taking a moment and doing some breath, taking some breaths, really being present with your breaths, feeling your bottom of your lungs expand, listening to the sound in the room, listening to the tea kettle boil, like all of these kind of things. And there's also like a good practice for the bedroom with presence too, is thinking about the way we even do things like hug. It's so common to just have an embrace with our partner and have our mind going all over the place to the next thing. But ways to practice is like really sinking into the hug. How does it feel, truly feel to be present totally with your partner's arms around you? Feeling their strength, feeling their softness, feeling their heart, feeling their closeness. Any of these things are dropping you into their touch. You're taking a walk together, taking a moment to hold each other's hands and like really just don't like do it absent-mindedly, but really feel that connection in their hands. And I really love breath work for this too, like taking moments even if there's like, a stressful time, practicing together, helping co regulate each other. So, doing activities, for example, such as touching each other's hearts, and just taking a couple deep breaths together just to help co-regulate during stress. But any of these things that are like mindfulness based types of activities, the capacity for pleasure is connected to the capacity for presence. So the more we can practice presence and the more we can practice mindfulness in our day-to-day lives, the more that translates into mindfulness in the bedroom. And orgasms really are a mindfulness based activity.
That feels so accessible, less about overhauls, more about intention and playfulness.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the play and the curiosity is something that if you look at kids, kids are so natural at just bringing play and curiosity into their everyday lives. And it has to be so much more of an intention. I think the older we get and the more responsibilities we have to really bring that curiosity and that play back in and say, like, okay, well, even if I've known my partner for 40, 50 years, I still don't know everything about them and we change constantly. And so I think sometimes we lose the curiosity because we feel like, oh, we already talked about that. But I've changed my mind on so many things throughout my life as far as like, oh, I learn more and I get different opinions on things. And so it's natural that we are growing and we're changing in time. And so maintaining that level of curiosity with our partner is also a huge way of maintaining that novelty, that interest, and that passion.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Diane Mueller has shown us that passion isn't about performance, it's about presence, curiosity, and decoding desires with courage. So, whether you're just beginning or decades in, remember this: love doesn't have to get boring, it can get bolder. Explore the edges, speak the truth, and let pleasure evolve with you.